Hi, I'm Bakhtiar Sanov and welcome to AnewZ. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. Israel strikes Iran's nuclear and military sites. Tehran vows harsh response. Latest developments of the conflict. Israel's attack on Iran have significantly damaged the Natanz nuclear facility, a key site in Iran's uranium enrichment program, IAEA says. Azerbaijan helps evacuate foreign nationals from Iran. AnewZ special reportage from the border. We start with the Middle East, where attacks between Iran and Israel continue. Iranian state TV reported 20 children are among around 60 killed in a strike on a neighborhood in Tehran. And in Israel, at least 3 people have been killed, with dozens more wounded, according to the country's paramedic service. Let's get more now on the most serious military confrontation in years between Israel and Iran. A night of airstrikes, missile barrages and the sirens that has left both nations on high alert and the region bracing for more.
A sky lit by war and a death toll that keeps climbing. Sirens wail across Tel Aviv as Israel's Iron Dome intercepts Iranian missiles after Israel launched what it called preemptive and precise strikes on Iranian soil. In Tehran, Iran's air defenses were activated for the second time in 48 hours. Footage shows multiple interceptions in the sky, the aftermath of Israeli jets targeting Iranian military and nuclear sites, killing several senior commanders and scientists. Iran's response was swift and destructive. In Ramat Gan, near Tel Aviv, missiles slammed into residential buildings.
So we are in the heart of a civilian area, and rockets fell here and made a massive destruction. We can see here buildings that were actually attacked and destroyed. There are people trapped here, and we try to rescue them.
Emergency crews battled through the night, pulling injured residents from the rubble.
We're talking about a night filled with debris impact sites here in Israel, specifically residential areas like the one you can see right behind me. Our police bomb squads are some of the best in the world. They're right now on call and on site, making sure that we can secure these locations for all the civilians.
In Tehran, outrage erupted. Crowds flooded the streets. President Masoud Pezeshkian called Israel's strike a foolish action that had killed children and civilians. At the United Nations, Iran's ambassador condemned the Israeli strikes as state terrorism.
These deliberate and systematic killing were not only illegal, but inhuman, a chilling display of calculated aggression. These atrocities constitute clear act of state terrorism and flagrant violation of international law.
Israel's envoy defended the operation, saying it was a last resort.
The operation was carried out because the alternative was unthinkable. How long did the world expect us to wait? How long? Let's speak about it. Until they assembled the bomb?
Israeli jets reportedly struck Iran's Fordow and Isfahan nuclear facilities. The Israeli military says this is just the beginning. Reservists have been called up and deployed across the country. The question is whether now Iran will pull out of nuclear talks with the United States. The strikes, though, send a clear signal. Diplomacy is no longer the priority. With both sides vowing further action, the confrontation is far from over, and the region is bracing for the next strike in a crisis that's spinning fast beyond control.
Tensions between Israel and Iran have escalated dramatically, prompting an emergency meeting at the United Nations Security Council. The International Atomic Energy Agency has confirmed the destruction of key components at Iran's Natanz nuclear site following Israeli airstrikes. The attacks have drawn sharp international reactions, raising fears of a broader regional conflict.
In a rare and urgent session at the UN Security Council, IAEA Director General Rafael Grossi confirmed that Israel's strikes on Iran have significantly damaged the Natanz nuclear facility, a key site in Iran's uranium enrichment program.
At Natanz, the above ground part of the pilot fuel enrichment plant, where Iran was producing uranium enriched up to 60% uranium-235, has been destroyed. Electricity infrastructure at the facility, an electrical substation, main electric power supply building, emergency power supply and backup generators have also been destroyed.
While no physical attack was confirmed on the underground Cascade Hall, Grossi warned that the loss of power might have caused damage to the sensitive centrifuges housed there. He stressed, however, that no radiological leakage has been detected. The IAEA also raised alarms over Iran's Fordo and Isfahan facilities.
At present, the Iranian authorities are informing us of attacks on two other facilities, namely the Fordo fuel enrichment plant and at Isfahan, where fuel plate fabrication plant, a fuel manufacturing plant, a uranium conversion facility, and an enriched UO2 powder plant are located. Now there is enough information for me to say to you that these facilities are also concerned.
Iran responded to Israel's strikes with retaliatory missile launches on Friday night. The Israeli government claims it is acting to halt Tehran's alleged ambitions to build an atomic bomb. International reaction was swift. Russia's UN ambassador called the strikes a gross violation of international law, while China warned Israel to cease what it called military adventurism. UN Under-Secretary-General Rosemary DiCarlo urged maximum restraint as Britain echoed calls for de-escalation and diplomacy.
Smoke was seen rising from Tehran's Mehrabad International Airport on Saturday, according to social media footage. Two large plumes of fire were visible in the video filmed from a moving car in the capital. Iranian media reported that two projectiles struck the airport, which also houses a military airbase. Flames were confirmed at the site, though the exact timing of the incident has not been independently verified. In Israel, people are returning to damaged homes after overnight missile strikes from Iran. In Ramat Gan, near Tel Aviv, one resident described the moment the blast hit her neighborhood.
Parts of Ramat Gan was left damaged after a missile hit this residential street overnight. Linda Greenfield was at home when the sirens went off. She made it to the shelter just before the explosion.
We heard the siren. We were lucky to run to the shelter. We were sitting in the shelter, and then we heard such a boom. It was awful. We were sure that the missile hit our building.
Emergency crews were on site early as residents began clearing debris from homes and vehicles.
It's invasion into your life, into your house, into not a very nice feeling. I mean, very depressing, very frustrating.
Like many here, Linda is unsure what happens next.
You don't know where this situation leads us to. I mean, it's an awful feeling. You really don't know what's going to happen in the next, I wouldn't say next day, next second. So it's not nice.
For now, people are focusing on cleanup and waiting for more clarity on what comes next.
Iran's foreign ministry said the ongoing indirect nuclear talks with the United States may not happen after accusing of Washington of giving Israel the green light to attack Iran. AnewZ Turaj Shiralilo is in Tehran with more.
Iran's foreign ministry said the ongoing indirect nuclear talks with the United States have become meaningless after Washington allowed Israel to attack Iran. Foreign Ministry spokesman Ismail Baghai condemned the division of work between the United States and Israel for violating Iran's territorial integrity. He said on the state IRIB TV that Washington cannot claim being in talks with Tehran and at the same time authorize Israel to attack Iran. His remarks came after U.S. officials said they hope Iran will continue the talks on nuclear issues despite of Israel's massive attacks on Friday against Iran's nuclear site and also killing Iranian generals and nuclear scientists. Despite terming the talks meaningless, the Iranian spokesman did not state whether the sixth round of talks between Iran and the United States to be held in Oman on Sunday are cancelled or not. Iran launched retaliatory attacks on Friday evening by firing a barrage of ballistic missiles against Israel minutes after Supreme Leader Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei said Iran's armed forces will respond powerfully. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, who is also the chief negotiator in Iran-US talks, told his counterparts that he rejects any restraint by Iranian forces. He told also UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres in a telephone talk that it is Iran's legitimate right to take revenge based on Article 51 of the UN Charter. Iran is expected to issue a statement on the fate of its talks with the United States tomorrow. And the stakes are very high that Iran will either postpone these talks indefinitely or leave the negotiating table. Turaj Shiralilu, reporting for AnewZ TV, Tehran.
U.S. President Donald Trump called the overnight Israeli attacks excellent. A bit earlier, he said that he gave Iran a 60-day ultimatum 2 months ago to make a deal, and that today was day 61. Trump also said that they might have a second chance now. In the first social media post following the strikes, he warned that Iran must agree to a nuclear deal before there is nothing left, suggesting Israel's next attacks could be even more brutal.
So do I, in all fairness.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has declared that these strikes were necessary to neutralize what he called an existential threat to Israel, promising that the campaign will continue for as long as needed. To help us understand the global repercussions of this development, I'm joined by Anna Evans, a respected geopolitical analyst who is with us today from Lisbon. Anna, thank you very much for being with us on AnewZ.
Thank you, Bakhtiar.
Thank you very much.
Good to see you.
Anna, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu framed these strikes as necessary for Israel's survival. From a geopolitical standpoint, how do you assess this justification and how might it play in the international arena?
Well, it is very clear that from Israel's point of view, the capacity by Iran to produce nuclear weapons is unthinkable. It really is a matter of national security, and it has been an issue for Israel over the past years. We know this for a fact. You know, Israel believes that at this point, Iran has enough enriched uranium for several atomic bombs. And whilst Israel has been able to dismantle the proxies of Iran around its territory, the same has not happened with Iran's nuclear capacity, which is very close to building a nuclear weapon. So from the point of view of Israel, if Iran has a nuclear weapon, Israel's existence is in danger. There is no way that this could be accepted from that perspective, because Iran has limited capacity in other military terms vis-à-vis Israel, and with the fall of Syria and the Syrian corridor that transported resources, both human resources and military equipment, to southern Lebanon, to Hezbollah, and through other parties to Hamas. With the fall of the Syrian corridor and the dismantling of Hezbollah and of Hamas as well, Israel is in a more beneficial position in military terms to be able to conduct an attack on Iran's nuclear facilities without being attacked by its proxies. So it has used this momentum to do something it wanted to do for quite a while.
Anna, Iran has warned of retaliatory attacks on United States, UK and French bases if they aid Israel. How serious is this threat, and what are the chances of this conflict drawing indoors Western powers directly?
Well, Bakhtiar, this goes back to your former question. If we see the reactions of the Arab countries, all the Arab countries around the Middle East have, or nearly all, have already made statements condemning this attack on Iran. And why? Because, as we know, there are several air bases that belong to the US, to France, and to the United Kingdom around the Arab countries. And, you know, in several of these regional countries, there are these military assets. And if Iran replies in attacking these assets, this would actually pose a risk to all these countries. Furthermore, if Iran opted to attack oil logistics around the Gulf, you know, in Arab countries, it would also be dramatic for the world oil markets. Well, I would say that although terrorist attacks and local attacks are probable, unfortunately, it will not be very easy for Iran to be spreading its activity around and, and going on major attacks around the area. But definitely, these bases are, of course, on a very, very high, I would say, purple alert. But Iran should not be very interested in propagating this war itself, in the same way that the United States is also not very interested in bringing its boots on the ground in terms of getting involved in the war. And so Marco Rubio has tried to convince the international venues and actors that the US has not been part of this attack. And Sir Keir Starmer in the UK has done the same thing. They are arguing that they were not part of the attack. But then, of course, President Trump has said that he was aware of this. And so, there are some mixed messages. But the fact is that no one wants this war to escalate. And no one wants it to, disseminate further the borders of Iran. But on the other hand, the fact that Israel wants to crater the underground production of nuclear assets is a risk, and it's of course against international law, in the sense that spilling radiation can pose a danger regionally, so at the local level and around the region. And so there's this very fine line between what Israel can do to dismantle Iranian nuclear capacity development and the risks that it poses in civilian terms as well. So let's see how this goes, because this is really a catch-22, a dilemma, a real, fine line for both parties.
So, Anna, in your opinion, what diplomatic options remain on the table to de-escalate the situation at this point?
Well, Bakhtiar, we know that every time there is a war conflict, diplomatic channels remain very vivid and very intensely alive and try to tame the intensity of the conflict. And so it is certain that behind the doors and underneath our mediatic radar, there are lots of diplomatic negotiations going on. And the Arab countries here have a position, because although the Arab countries, several of them are actually rivals of Iran, as we've seen at the beginning of the program, the Arab nations are not interested in having conflict within their doorsteps. And so the Arab countries are also trying to push very hard, to tame this situation. Turkey, of course, is not happy as well. And the United States also does not want the war to escalate. And Iran has been very clear. If Iran feels that the United States is providing backup support in terms of deterring Iranian attacks, as it did in the latest Israeli attack and retaliation, if the US does that, Iran says it will consider that backup help as mingling in the war, and it will retaliate accordingly. So the US does not want the war to escalate, neither do European powers, nor do the Arab countries. And as for Iran, there's also a very fine line between the survival of a regime which is getting very old, both ideologically and chronologically, and what a war means in terms of gathering people around the leaders. Same thing with Israel. Very contested government in Israel, but a war always brings people around a government, and it plays into the hands of governmental centralization, because that's a requirement at times of conflict, of external conflict. So once one finds external enemies, internally there's this kind of reunion around the leadership. So it's a very, very delicate situation at the international level and at the regional level as well. I would not expect it to escalate dramatically. Unfortunately, I expect to see some attacks localized to show that Iran has not been completely dismantled in its capacity, although in reality it looks very likely that Iranian anti-air missile defense capacities are pretty much gone at this point. So Israel has pretty much an open airspace to do what it needs to do. Again, the United States has not yet provided those very sophisticated cratering weapons, the ones that crater underground. And so Israel does not have access yet to those most sophisticated, underground digging weapons. But if Israel keeps targeting the nuclear sites, it will, with repetition, be able to get to where it wants to get in terms of the underground capacity.
AnewZ, thank you very much for talking to AnewZ. We appreciate you taking the time to join us from Lisbon. A flood of reactions is pouring in after Israel strikes on Iran. UN General Secretary and officials around the world have urged for maximum restraint, with some condemning the attacks.
Leaders and government representatives from several countries and regions called for restraint after Israel launched its biggest ever offensive against Iran in a bid to prevent it from developing nuclear weapons. Among those expressing their concern over the situation was United Nations Secretary-General Antonio Guterres.
The Secretary-General condemns any military escalation in the Middle East. He's particularly concerned by Israeli attacks on nuclear installations in Iran, while talks between Iran and the United States on the status of Iran's nuclear program are underway. The Secretary-General recalls the obligation of UN member states to act in accordance with the UN Charter and international law. The Secretary-General asks both sides to show maximum restraint, avoiding at all costs a descent into deeper conflict, a situation that the region can hardly afford.
President of the European Commission Ursula von der Leyen said she spoke with Israeli President Isaac Herzog concerning the escalating situation in the Middle East. She reiterated Israel's right to defend itself and protect its people, but emphasized that preserving regional stability was vital. Turkish President Erdogan called the Israeli strikes a clear provocation. He said that Israel has taken its strategy of drowning our region, especially Gaza, in blood, tears and instability to a very dangerous stage. Israel's attack on their neighbour Iran were a clear provocation that disregards international law. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Azerbaijan said they were deeply concerned by the military operation carried out by Israel against Iran. They condemned the escalation of the situation and urged both countries to resolve their differences through dialogue and diplomatic means. The Armenian Foreign Ministry said it was deeply concerned, especially given it was taking place ahead of the next round of negotiations. On a post on X, they added, "We condemn such actions and call for immediate cessation of hostilities." France's Macron says Iran is responsible for destabilizing the region.
L'Iran porte une lourde responsabilité dans la déstabilisation de toute la région.
Iran bears a heavy responsibility for the destabilization of the entire region. And so, I say with the greatest clarity, the risk of this march toward nuclear weapons by Iran threatens the region, Europe, and collective stability more generally. We cannot live in a world where Iran possesses the atomic bomb, because it is an existential threat and a threat to our collective security.
British Prime Minister Keir Starmer released a statement urging stability in the region, saying the reports of these strikes are concerning and that the UK urges all parties to step back and reduce tensions urgently. China's foreign ministry spokesperson said they were deeply worried about any escalation.
China is closely paying attention to the Israeli attack on Iran and is deeply worried about the serious consequences that the relevant action may bring. China opposes the violation of Iran's sovereignty, security and territorial integrity, and opposes the intensification of contradictions and the expansion of the conflict.
At the center of everything is Iran's nuclear program, as Israel deems it an existential threat for Iran to be nuclear armed. Tehran had always maintained its program is for civilian purposes. The once agreed nuclear deal cutting Iran's nuclear capabilities from 2015 collapsed after Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the deal during his first term. Here is what is known of Iran's nuclear program now.
Iran's nuclear program spans a wide geography from underground bunkers to open facilities in key cities. The spotlight often falls on the question, does Iran want nuclear weapons? The US and the UN watchdog IAEA believe Tehran had a covert nuclear weapons program that was halted in 2003. Iran firmly denies this.
Many years on from that withdrawal, which has seen the US impose significant sanctions on the Iranian economy, Iran has escalated by advancing its program significantly. It is certainly very advanced and dangerously close.
Following the 2015 nuclear deal, which offered sanctions relief in return for nuclear limits, progress stalled. When President Trump pulled the US out in 2018, Iran ramped up uranium enrichment. Today, Iran is enriching uranium up to 60%, close to the 90% weapons-grade threshold.
Concretely, we don't have 100% oversight of the program, but intelligence agencies, including US intelligence agencies, recently released that they don't believe Iran has made a decision yet to weaponize its program.
Now let's look at Iran's major nuclear facilities. Natanz, Iran's primary enrichment hub. Located south of Tehran, part of it is buried deep underground. It houses around 16,000 centrifuges, refining uranium up to 5%. But its smaller pilot plant enriches uranium up to 60%. The site has previously suffered sabotage, which Iran blames on Israel. Fordow, hidden inside a mountain near Qom, this site is better shielded from airstrikes. It was once off limits under the 2015 deal. Today, nearly 350 advanced centrifuges enrich uranium here to 60%. Isfahan, home to uranium processing and conversion. It's also where Iran can make uranium metal, a substance used in bomb cores. Isfahan also stores enriched uranium. Kondab, a heavy water reactor with potential plutonium output. Its original core was filled with concrete after the 2015 agreement, but Iran now plans to activate the reactor by 2026. Tehran includes Iran's research reactor, used for scientific purposes. Bushehr, Iran's only functioning nuclear power plant. It uses Russian fuel, which is returned after use, reducing proliferation risks. Despite these developments, Tehran continues to signal that it remains open to negotiation with deep mistrust.
The negotiations may lead to results, or they may not. We're very skeptical of the other side. We don't accept or trust them, but we're optimistic about our own capabilities.
Talks are ongoing, sometimes in back channels.
It lasted about 2.5 hours. It took place in a calm and positive atmosphere.
Meanwhile, the US maintains a clear position.
I think Iran could be a great country as long as it doesn't have nuclear weapons.
Yet Israel's expectations go further, a complete dismantling.
It wants Iran to fully renounce its nuclear program, including the peaceful dimensions of its nuclear program. And that is something that Iran is not likely to do.
Iran sees itself surrounded and threatened, especially after seeing what happened to countries that gave up their nuclear capabilities.
It looks around and sees countries like Iraq or Libya or even Ukraine that have renounced their nuclear programs as having been made vulnerable.
In this geopolitical chess game, both Iran and world powers are weighing the cost of delay.
So there are some interests in a fast timeline, but there are, of course, obstacles in arriving at a quick deal.
But this story doesn't end with diplomacy. In the early hours of June 13th, Israel launched a large-scale military operation, Rising Lion, striking Iran's key nuclear site, including Natanz, and reportedly targeting senior commanders and nuclear scientists. With Iran vowing bitter and painful retaliation, the future of nuclear diplomacy now faces a pivotal crossroads. Will this military escalation derail talks entirely or force a renewed push toward resolution?
Global markets are reacting sharply to rising tensions in the Middle East. Iran's missile attack on Israel has sent shockwaves through investor circles, pushing down stocks. It has also fueled concerns over energy security and geopolitical stability.
Wall Street ended the day sharply lower after Iran launched missiles at Israel. The attack followed Israeli airstrikes on Iranian territory earlier in the week. The broader market tumbled. The Dow Jones fell nearly 770 points. The Nasdaq dropped 255 points, while the S&P 500 lost over 68 points. Fears grew that regional instability could disrupt energy supplies from the Middle East. Oil prices surged nearly 7%. The energy sector was one of the few gainers, with companies seeing strong upticks in share prices. Defense stocks also climbed on expectations of increased military spending, but airline shares fell due to fuel price and travel worries. However, analysts believe the market may stabilize despite the current turmoil.
My view is that the market collectively is now viewing whatever these 10% numbers are as that's the cap on tariffs. They're not going to go higher than that. They could potentially go lower. So that kind of is incorporated into the market already. I think. And we've also had other geopolitical conflicts that continue to go on. But I think this is something new. Today's conflict the impact could dissipate. Over the long term, I've seen studies that show that wars generally don't have a major impact on stock markets. Over, say a period of a few months to a few years, with some obvious exceptions, but in general, if it's a local conflict, it doesn't tend to have a huge impact on stocks.
Investors are cautious amid uncertainty, and markets are expected to remain volatile as tensions continue.
Amid rising tensions in Iran, Azerbaijan is helping evacuate foreign nationals through its southern border. Dozens of artists and citizens from various countries have crossed into Azerbaijan as Baku responds to international requests for humanitarian assistance. Meanwhile, Russia has thanked Azerbaijan for helping evacuate 86 citizens, including children from Iran.
We are at the Azerbaijan-Iran border witnessing Azerbaijan's support for evacuation efforts from the Islamic Republic of Iran. The crisis situation unfolding in Iran has prompted the evacuation of citizens from several countries who were stranded there.
We travelled for a very long time and stayed here for a long time. Practically in a holding area on the Iranian side. It's clear what the situation is there. They're all just as confused and unsure about what's happening. A huge thank you. This feels like home, and that feeling is incredible.
In response to official requests, the Republic of Azerbaijan is facilitating the evacuation of individuals from Iran.
First and foremost, I want to thank President Ilham Aliyev for the unprecedented assistance in crossing the border between Iran and Azerbaijan. There are 90 people in our group. Everyone is safe and healthy, and right now they are crossing the border. Thank you for the support and attention that I know was given to our group. Truly, this was a big deal.
As a result of these measures, representatives and citizens of multiple countries, including the 51-member delegation of Russia's Pyotr Tchaikovsky Grand Symphony Orchestra, who were visiting Iran, as well as nearly 90 actors and art personnel, among them the People's Artist of the Russian Federation and director Fyodor Bondarchuk, have arrived in Azerbaijan from Iran by land.
Ayten Shukurova, Nijat Gasimov from Astara, Azerbaijan for AnewZ.
That's all we have for now from Baku. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates.